Hello YouTube, my name is Brench, and I'm going to be giving you a brief introduction to Tafl games. Tafl games are a family of abstract strategy board game that originated with the Vikings and are characterized by a central king and his armies going to battle against a larger encircling force. The goal of the game is for the king to either escape to the corners of the board or the edges of the board, which is probably the more historical version of the game. However, because our knowledge of the rules of Tafl games, and specifically this larger game here, known as Hnefatafl, are somewhat incomplete, we've been forced to reconstruct the game with a variety of different capture or king capture and escape rules in order to make the game playable. The smaller game is known as Tablut, and there is a largely extant collection of rules for this game, and it's believed now that this game is characterized mostly by having a king escape to the edges of the board rather than the corners. The larger game here, Hnefatafl, as I said, has a much less complete set of rules, and specifically the variant of the game I'm going to be talking to you about, Copenhagen Hnefatafl, is a very, very modern update of what we know of the extant game. To begin with, Tafl games, as I said, are characterized by conflict between these two armies, and with that in mind, there is a mode for capturing pieces between the two forces. So collateral capture is the mode of capture used in all Tafl games, and what that means basically is sandwiching. So say you have a white piece here and a brown or black piece here, and the board configuration is like this. White would be captured by encirclement, or rather sandwiching between two black pieces. The same holds true for a lone black piece. It can easily be captured. Let's make this a little more plausible. By sandwiching between two white pieces. In Hnefatafl, the king is captured by surrounding him on four sides by the advancing enemy army. That rarely happens in most games. The king will resign when he sees that this is inevitable. However, this version of capture is probably not terribly historical, at least for boards of this size and configuration. What is more likely to have been the case historically is what's seen in Tablut, where the king is captured just like any other piece. However, for the size and shape of the larger Hnefatafl board, and some of the assumed or reconstructed gameplay rules that are used in the Copenhagen Hnefatafl variant, two-man capture does not make for a very playable game if you're going to try and escape to the corners of the board. Pieces move, as you've probably seen already, like rooks in chess, orthogonally, and as far up or down a file as they can go without obstruction. The game is actually quite complex, and in terms of overall playability, it's fairly well balanced considering it is an asymmetric game. I think some of the play ratios that I've seen look to indicate that about between 1.25 and 1.4 wins for white for every one win of black. And that's not as balanced as chess, but really game balance is very difficult in an asymmetric game. And given that the asymmetry is part of the charm of this particular game, learning to think like your opponent, learning to understand his probably very different strategy from yours, that kind of game balance is really good enough. I think if a variant of Hnefatafl or any Tafl game is too balanced, it does begin to lose some of its charm. Now, as I mentioned, the object of these two games is slightly different. Partly that has to do with the size of the board, and as I said, partly it has to do with, as we mentioned, the reconstruction of the rules. And that means for the two kinds of game, there are some very different strategies. I'm going to be going into these strategies for both Copenhagen Hnefatafl and Tablut in the near future, and hopefully you guys will stick around for that video. Alright, so my next video will focus entirely on Copenhagen Hnefatafl, and will have more emphasis on some of the unique peculiarities of the gameplay that have been introduced to make this game increasingly playable and complex, so that it makes for a plausible rival for chess in terms of strategic complexity. Thanks, and have a very nice day. See you next time, and hope you enjoy the coming videos.